Hi. Welcome to the third chapter of Echoes of Enlightenment, where we discuss Hobbes and how the pursuit of philosophy defined his life. Come along with us.
Third literary figure. A study with Thomas Hobbes. April 15, 1588 to December 14, 1679. Being an English philosopher during the Enlightenment was not so much easy or hard as it was more so necessary. Born prematurely in April of 1588, Hobbes' birth preceded an anticipated invasion of the Spanish Armada in May by Phillip II of Spain, whose marriage to Queen Mary I of England and Ireland made him jure uxoris, king of all three. When Henry Frederick, Prince of Wales, was as heir apparent prepared to inherit the United Kingdom after James VI, where his life was structured like a collegiate court, preferring that Henry should rather initiate a college than a court. Prince Henry was highly decorated with educational experiences that added to his wealth of cultural understanding. Woodstock Palace was given to Prince Henry in 1611, where a temporary structure of branches from trees was constructed in a park with musical instruments considerably expensive for his mother and sister, Elizabeth. London's love to Prince Henry was a pageant to his investiture with Tethys Festival, a masque where his mother entrusted him with a sword of justice. Henricus, VA, was named in 1611, Henrico County, VA, and Cape Henry also, as he was the then supreme protector of English empiricism in the Northwest Passage. Thomas Hobbes was 24 years old when the young prince died of typhoid fever, and 37 when Charles Stuart was crowned king of the islands. Hobbes was a typical royalist who hadn't focused on philosophy until 29, but his social contract theory contributes to English political theory today, while then freedom of speech was not that free at all.
Beginning school at Westport Church and matriculating to Malmesbury School, Thomas Hobbes went on for further education in a private school under Robert Latimer. Hobbes to Latimer, the Oxford graduate, was a student better than most, affording him the opportunity to champion mathematics and scholastic logic at Magdalen Hall 1601 to 1602. Though the first doctoral degree was issued by the University of Paris in 1150, after the fall of the Roman Empire in 476, the Dark Ages were so until the Age of Enlightenment from a lack mental illumination. At the university he completed his BA degree in 1608 through incorporation with St. John's College in Cambridge. His Elements of Law was dedicated to William Cavendish, 1st Duke of Newcastle, who was a staunch supporter of Charles I. On a tour of Europe with young Cavendish, Hobbes was exposed to scientific methods he hadn't been with the more scholastic philosophy encouraged at Oxford. Hobbes' interest in Greek and Latin works had been apparent since his translation of Medea by Euripides, before Oxford would resurface in 1628 in his translation of History of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides. Though Hobbes wouldn't devote himself to philosophy until 1629, after being dismissed in June of the previous year by the Cavendish widow, he was an amanuensis of Francis Bacon, translating many of his essays to Latin.
Philosophy led Hobbes to Paris from 1629 to 1637 in the role of a tutor for a baron's junior son, but becoming a regular and master debater of Marin Mersennet's philosophical groups as Enlightenment spread. From 1630 he'd found re-employment tutoring another Cavendish, but as we all have pastimes, his curiosity in philosophy encouraged its development in him, while his skill at debate strong-armed whoever happened to be opposed. He began trying to get a better understanding of physical momentum and motion concerning physical doctrine, but only in theory, as in practice he would prefer not. Being enlightened, he'd develop a system of thought to which his life would be devoted, where first, a doctrine of body's motions more so systematic would be delivered. Second, distinguishing man from every other body in the universe, Hobbes separates man from nature. Next, thirdly, identifying what motions or functions of the body were passions, sensations, affections, or knowledge we subsequently realize man or those other. Lastly, becoming a political philosopher, he concerned himself with man's entry into society, as he felt brutishness and misery of outside factors may infect what level of civility society had achieved. Arguing for regulation, Hobbes proposed the unification of body, man, and the state, which were previously separate phenomena.
Despite the brutishness and misery afforded the masses of the English people under 11 years' tyranny of Charles I's personal rule, Hobbes moved back to England in 1637. In England, for the short and long parliaments, Hobbes by 1640 would self-publish the Elements of Law, Natural, and Politic. In it put forth that consent of the governed was not necessary in patrimonial kingdoms, while later in life changed his rhetoric in Leviathan, completed in 1650, putting forth it is. Returning to France for the rest of 11 years' tyranny, after the Long Parliament, where he elaborated his critique of Descartes' The Meditations on First Philosophy. Well known amongst philosophical circles in France, and having contemplated squaring the circle, English royalty retreating to France technically followed philosophers like Hobbes and jolted his clout as he republished De Civ. Enlightened by Hobbes' positions in relation to Descartes, in order of De Civ, Leviathan was composed with a theory of civil government considering his loyalist persuasion and the English Civil War. Comparing the state to the monstrous Leviathan, who created, by man's insatiable needs quelled by the passions elevated through civil unrest, temporarily. Both Leviathan and the translation of De Civ were published in 1651, with the former formally titled Leviathan or the Matter, Ecclesiastical and Civil, and the later translation titled Philosophical Rudiments Concerning Government and Society.
His work proved him a most notable philosophical figure of his time, but separating his thought from that of exiled royalist, French Catholics, and Anglicans, he sought protection under the then new English revolutionary government in 1651. Appealing to the new States Council, Hobbes was allowed a private life where he continued philosophy. By 1655 De Corpore, On the Body, and by 1658 De Homin, On Man, were published. Having tutored the new King Charles II, his works were as important as controversial where the term Hobbism was frowned upon, but £100 pension was afforded Hobbes by his former pupil, now the King. A bill by the House of Commons in 1666 was introduced against profanities and atheism where his Leviathan was charged such.
That's all the information we have for you at this time. Next session we will discuss John Locke in the 4th chapter of our book on Baroque literature.